welcome everyone to very first interview of Empowered Women, Empower Women. And first of all, thank you so much for all the nominations. However, when I received the nominations, like I have received over 200 nominations, and I was very impressed, very excited. And at the same time, I realized one thing, which is out of 200, there were only two people who nominated themselves, and everyone was asking other women to talk, but very few were saying that I want to talk, I want to say something. So that's going to be our topic for tomorrow, which is what is such a big deal with us women about speaking up. And obviously, like I mentioned earlier, that we are going to cover women from all over the globe. That brings us to our today's person that we are going to interview. I am so thankful to you, Naheed. I couldn't have found anyone better than you to interview for this first interview.
Purnima, thank you so much for the introduction. I mean, because I just feel lucky because I'm sure there are plenty of women out there who have similar resumes and CVs and who just haven't had the opportunity to get in front of you. So thank you for that introduction.
Thank you so much. So Naheed has worked in, let me see if I can cover all the countries that you have worked in. Naheed has worked in Australia, the UK, China, Russia, many countries in South Asia, and in the Middle East. And in addition to that, obviously, Naheed, I told you the countries, and she has worked with, she has had good experience. She has worked with all the big names that we all wish to work with, likes of Unilever and Hershey's. You can go to her LinkedIn and see what all companies she has worked at. All of them very impressive, very global, very multinational. And Naheed is currently a founder of iWill, which is what I personally like about iWill is their balanced approach with data and empathy. Another highlight, she speaks at global events, big conferences. She's a great speaker. Has also authored best-selling books. She was recently awarded Middle East Women Leadership Award of 2018. And I think we are just lucky to have her with us. And after doing all these things, now she is involved in her own enterprise. She's an entrepreneur now. She runs a consulting firm called iWill. Naheed, can you just tell us a little bit about iWill, and then we can go into our more deeper conversation about speaking up?
For iWill, iWill is basically an end-to-end solution to create workplace gender parity. So it began with the intent to convert ivory tower speeches, so to speak, into actual actions, walking the talk. And it has a focus on conversion at the point where we need to shift the mindsets the most, which is middle management. We work with organizations to augment their gender parity policy, not to reinvent it, but to augment it. And we also provide a safe space where people can talk without being judged. The way we provide our training in order to shift mindsets is, as you mentioned, through a mix of data and empathy, because only when something becomes personal can you actually feel the impact and you actually want to change your behavior. So I think you captured it very well in a summary, and we can talk more about it as we go deeper if you like.
I guess that's like the gender parity piece of it that you work in iWill is the most exceptional one. And I obviously of the opinion that all organizations all over the world need it, because like in theory, many a times in theory, men know what to do and how to do it, but there is kind of a fear also. So they need safe space to open up, discuss, and then understand it at deeper level of what it means to bring gender equality. So why don't we go on the other side and go to our main thing that we need to discuss is why should women speak up? Like, why can't we just go on doing about our own work and not speak up at all? Like, it's about work. Then what's it about speaking up?
So I think it's really important to speak up when you're in an area of your work. When you have an opinion, it's really important to have that opinion heard. It all boils down to communication. I think in our lives, communication is the one tool that can enable the creation of so many bridges, because people think differently. If we were all clones, there wouldn't be a need to speak up. You could just assume everybody is going to be thinking the way you are, but we're not. So that very, very important piece and that often overlooked piece is what actually can make the other person realize, who could very well have unintentionally been behaving the way they were, that, oh, maybe my behavior is not appropriate, or maybe if I used to do it or it was appropriate in the past, maybe it's not appropriate anymore. So that communication creates a portal, so to speak, for change, because you've opened a doorway, you've created, you've planted a little seed that, all right, things might not be okay. So it's really, really important to do that. And that ties back to what I shared earlier, which is about providing a safe space without being judged.
What you're saying totally makes sense, the unconscious bias. And so obviously, the other, because of that unconscious bias, if we speak up, we are considered to be bossy. There are women who are worried about being perceived what they are not. So what is your advice to them? How can they speak up and speak up keeping in parallel with their own personality?
Sure. I mean, you've touched on such a key point, which is that where men are seen as assertive, a woman saying the same thing would be seen as aggressive. And this isn't an opinion, it's not subjective, it is documented, it is factual. In fact, there are some studies that were done in the US a few years ago that actually linked the decrease in the perceived value of what a woman brings to a business with her assertiveness, or in this case, aggressiveness. So it is there. It exists as an unconscious bias, and whether we like it or not. And most likely, the people who are making these assumptions are not doing it because they consciously don't like women in the workplace. They're just doing it because of mindsets, previously embedded mindsets, the culture they've been brought up in historically, where the markets that they work in. So my advice to women is, this is going to happen sooner or later. There are a couple of points. One is that the minute somebody starts saying that you're not a team player or you're too aggressive, it's a red flag, and you need to specifically ask for examples. And I would say, if you're comfortable enough with your manager or the person you're having a conversation with at that point, ask, if you can, lightly, if they would have had the same response if it had been a given male colleague. So that's one. The second thing is, control the pitch of your voice if you can. So a high pitch or going off into a high pitch suggests, that you're getting panic, you're getting stressed out, and that can often be an unnecessary distraction. And that's the way we women are. But if we could just be a little conscious of trying to control the pitch of our voice, I don't mean a deadpan face or a monotone voice, just in terms of that is another area. And frankly, that varies from person to person. But the third and really, really important thing that can help this is to put facts. So talk with facts. Try to remove the opinion. Try to talk with facts. If somebody is questioning what you're saying, or you need to put a point across, put it across as facts rather than as opinion.
That makes so much sense. And thank you for putting it as, like 1, 2, 3. It's like I'm going to write these 3 rules somewhere in front of me and keep them in front of me all the time. it was the best framework that I have heard. Like, do these three things and you can speak up. At the same time, you won't be perceived differently from what you are. And you are really good at it. I have always known you as very articulate, very eloquent, very persuasive person. So were you always like this, or there was a moment where something changed, or was it a process where it changed?
Oh, for sure. And thank you so much for that. But it all, anyone can be that way. It's a lot about practice. It's a lot about, it literally comes down to practice, those 10,000 hours of practice in terms of the way you speak, how you speak, practicing before presentations, before meetings. Just something you learn along the way. And it's easy to offer these tips and say, that this is what you should do. But the point is, I grew and learned it as well. You grew and learned it through experience as well. So that's the other thing. There's no, I mean, you will have to feel the pain at some point and go through experience and learn from past mistakes. It's just that if you can just keep learning from your mistakes and, pick yourself back up, dust yourself off and keep going, it'll just make the journey a little easier because you learn something every time you fall.
So that brings me to a good point, which is, um, you just said that you have been through it, so it's not like you started your career with this best practices and you exactly knew what to do. You learned through your experiences, and now you know what works and what doesn't work. Do you want to share any experience that you remember, that this was the point, or this was the biggest obstacle in me speaking up?
So for me, the most intimidating meetings have been when there have been a lot of people, rather than two or three. And there's the same question going in my head that probably goes in most people's heads: that should I speak up? Should I not speak up? Will I be considered an idiot? And like I said, I ask myself, what do I have to lose if I do speak up? But then in my past corporate life, I used to break them down into people. So I used to try to isolate very quickly around the room who are the people. If they were not in the room, or if they were not in the meeting, would I be comfortable if A or Mr. B or Miss C or Ms. D was not in the room? And then I try to block them out, because there's always one or two people who will be driving it for whatever reason. It may be your boss or the CEO or some leadership team or somebody who's known to be a tough cookie. And if you can kind of block them or try to block them out of your mind and speak to the rest of the team, then it really, really helps. That's one tip in a large gathering when one is intimidated, to just try to isolate in your mind which variable is it, which person is it who's creating that fear, who's driving that fear the most. It really, I think a lot has to do with the market that you are working in at the time, and what the level of workplace gender parity awareness is. If there is a high level of workplace gender parity awareness, then by default, people will be more accepting of you and what you say or how you speak. If you're operating in an area where culturally women are considered to be, they should be more effeminate, and they shouldn't speak harshly or loudly, you're going to have a much tougher time, because those unconscious biases, and again, I reinforce unconscious. Nobody does it, well, very few would do it deliberately. Those unconscious biases come into play. So I think first of all, the region that you're in is very important. Secondly, how aware that organization is. Thirdly, what I noticed, and this is something I've shared at various conferences and opportunities to speak in the past, it's really important to remember that headquarter policies for large organizations do not by default translate into regional office policies. And what I mean by that is that you could have the most fantastic workplace gender parity policy that is being rolled out by the headquarter in the US or somewhere in Europe or somewhere in Australia, but your regional office in another part of the world, in Asia, in the Middle East, in Africa, let's not assume that it will be 100% interpreted and integrated into the local organizational culture. And the reason for that is because again, the variables are the environment that you're working in, the market and the regional environment that you're working in. They are very strong influencers on interpretation of headquarter policy.
It's like they can understand those policies in theory, but they don't know how to apply them. So someone who has made those policies actually need to go to the people who are going to implement those policies and talk often and make them understand what they actually mean. And I know that both of us can sit and talk about this exact same topic of speaking up and the policies of gender equality in organizations forever. And yet we need to end this. So let's stop here for today. And thank you so much, mainly for giving the framework and opening at least my eyes to how policies could be different in theory and in practice and what could be done about it. And I look forward to having you again. And I'm sure, like me, a lot of other women are thankful for learning about these strategies. And let's talk soon.
Yes, thank you very much for having me on your show. And thank you also to your viewers. It's been a pleasure and an honor. And I'll see you soon again, I hope.